All right, welcome grammar detectives. Today we are cracking a classic case, maybe one of the most common in the English language, subject-verb agreement. So our mission, should you choose to accept it, is to find the real subject of a sentence, even when it's hiding in plain sight, and make sure it's paired with the perfect verb partner. Let's jump right in with our first piece of evidence.
Okay, take a good look at the sentence. Is it was or were? Now, your gut reaction might be to zero in on the word medicines. It's plural, right? So were seems like the obvious choice. But is it? This is exactly the kind of clever disguise we're here to unravel. And trust me, by the end of this, you are going to know the answer without a doubt.
You know, every good detective has to know the law before they can enforce it. And in the world of grammar, the number one law is that every sentence needs a subject and a verb that click. They have to work together like partners in a squad car. And here's the prime directive for these partners. They have to agree in number. It's actually really simple when you boil it down. One subject gets one kind of verb. More than one subject, that gets a different kind of verb. Singular subjects take singular verbs, and plural subjects get plural verbs. This is the bedrock of our entire investigation today. So, for example, it's super simple here. The dog runs. One dog, so the verb gets that S. But then you have the dogs run. Multiple dogs, and that S vanishes. Now this seems almost too easy, doesn't it? Well, this is where the grammar criminals get sneaky. They just love to hide right between these two partners to cause confusion. And that brings us to the main event, really. The biggest challenge in subject-verb agreement isn't the rule itself. No, it's finding the real subject. Because a lot of the time, the subject is separated from its verb by a whole crew of tricky, deceptive words that I like to call the middlemen. And here they are, our primary suspects. Let's get a good look at them. Prepositional phrases and subordinate clauses. Their whole job is to add extra information, which is fine, but in the process, they can fool you into matching the verb with the wrong noun. Our job is to learn how to see right through their disguises. Okay, let's interrogate suspect number one, the prepositional phrase. These are little groups of words that start with things like of, in, on, with, from, and their only job is to add description. They're just the flavor, not the main course. So here's the clue you have to burn into your brain. The true subject of your sentence is never hiding inside a prepositional phrase.
Let's look at this sentence. I mean, it is jam-packed with these distractions, right? You've got near Galway, on the road, to Spittle. It's so easy to get lost in all that. So where's the real subject? What is actually gorgeous here?
So let's do some real detective work. If we just mentally cross out all those prepositional phrases, poof, they're gone. What are we left with? The houses are gorgeous. Aha! The real subject is houses. It's plural. So the verb has to be the plural are. Case closed on that one. See how that works? Now for our second type of middleman, the subordinate clause. Think of these like big, fancy adjectives. They often kick off with words like who or which, and they add really interesting details. But just like those prepositional phrases, they are only there to describe something. They are not the main subject. Okay, let's check out another crime scene. We've got a little warm-up phrase, when the auditors left. And then we've got this subordinate clause, who had been interviewed. All of this is just noise, and it's designed to make you lose track of who was actually glad. So let's clear away the clutter. Just ignore the warm-up, ignore that whole who clause. What's left? The executive was glad. See? The executive is one person, a singular subject. And because of that, the verb has to be the singular was. You're seeing the pattern, right? Just ignore the middlemen. Okay, so now that we know how to spot those middlemen trying to hide between the subject and the verb, let's look at a different kind of culprit. These are phrases that look like they should create a plural subject, but they're actually just imposters hiding in plain sight. Now, this is a really important one. The word and is a true connector. It glues two subjects together to make a plural. Joe and his friends, that's a group, so they are going. But look over on the right. Phrases like as well as or along with or in addition to, they're not connectors, they're just modifiers. The real subject is still just Joe, so Joe is going. His friends are just extra info. So what about pairs like either or and neither nor? This one has a really simple and elegant rule, and it's called the proximity rule. It's awesome. You don't have to worry about the whole phrase. All you have to do is look at the noun that is physically right next to the verb. That's the one that calls the shots.
Look at how this plays out. In that first sentence, the word players is closest to the verb. Players is plural, so we use are. But in the second sentence, we just flip them around. Now the word coach is the one that's closest. Coach is singular, so we use is. It's literally just about which noun is touching the verb. That one wins.
Okay, detective, let's move on and tackle our next set of tricky customers. We're talking about nouns that represent groups and some pronouns that can be, well, a little shifty.
First up, we have collective nouns. These are words like team, crowd, committee, army. Now, even though they describe a group of people or things, grammar usually treats the group as one single thing, one unit. So here's the rule you gotta remember. They almost always take a singular verb.
So, for instance, the crowd, even if it has thousands of people, is one entity, so the crowd is cheering. The team is one unit, so the team takes the field. A good little trick is to just think of the group as a single it. It is cheering, it takes the field. Works every time.
Okay, next up are the pronouns. Now, most of them, like everyone or somebody, are always singular. Easy enough. But there are 5 special ones that are like chameleons. They change their color. And you can remember them with this handy acronym, SANM. That's some, any, none, all, and more or most. Their number, whether they're singular or plural, depends entirely on what they're referring to. So how does this work? Well, to figure out if a SANM pronoun is singular or plural, you have to look for clues in the prepositional phrase that comes right after it. In some of the money, money is singular, you can't count it, so some was stolen. But in some of the documents, documents is plural, you can count them, so some were stolen. The pronoun just borrows its number from whatever noun follows it. All right, we have cornered our main suspects. We've figured out their tricks. Now it's time for the final showdown. A couple of the toughest, most specific rules that, honestly, even seasoned writers can get wrong sometimes. This is a classic. A number of is just a common phrase, an idiom, that really just means many or some. So you treat it as plural. A number of students are. But the number of refers to the specific numeral, the actual quantity itself, which is a single concept. So the number is. It's a really subtle difference, but it's a powerful one.
So, there we have it. We cracked the case. We started with that tricky sentence, remember? The discovery of new medicines. Now we know what to do. We eliminate that middleman of new medicines, and we see the true subject is discovery. Discovery is singular, so the answer has to be was. The discovery was vital. You see? Now that you have the tools, now that you know how to spot the true subject, the real question is, what other grammar crimes can you uncover hiding out there in plain sight? Keep your eyes sharp.